What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to talk about what's going on with NIO stock and break down some very important technical details. I'm going to talk about what happened with earnings as NIO saw a big drop because they ended up missing on revenue and also other important factors about their guidance. But before I break things down, information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull and deposit $500, you are guaranteed 20 free stocks. And deposit $25,000 or more, you're guaranteed 75 of them. And the offer ends in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, for NIO, I just want to note that despite the drop we saw today, almost a 7% drop, NIO still has a nice inverse head and shoulder structure that is holding. That does give potential for a bounce, but there's no sign yet. And we saw a very, very big decline, so we have to see if NIO could hold these supports. Now, if we were to lose support all the way down here around this 4.8 area, if we started losing that and start dipping below that, I think we could come all the way down to fill the gap at all the way down to the low fours before anything else. But if we manage to hold above this 407 to 4.7 to 4.8 area, there is potential for this thing to bounce as long as we hold above that range for the inverse head and shoulders to play out. So I do think it's going to dip a little bit more tomorrow, but we'll have to see how it ends up developing. So let me break down some more details about the market, and I'll talk about NIO's earnings. Tomorrow is going to be a very important day. Tomorrow is going to be Friday, June 7th, 2024. Please note that 1 hour before the market ends up opening, we have the unemployment data coming out that's going to be very key for how we end up moving. Not to mention governmental and manufacturing payrolls data. So all the jobs numbers are going to be key for what ends up happening tomorrow. The market's going to have a big reaction, and the unemployment rate is going to be key. We also have Cook from the Fed giving a speech alongside other factors. But let me just make it very clear that the unemployment rate is going to be one of the biggest pieces of data. It's going to have a big effect on the Fed's policies 1 hour before the market opens, and may even end up affecting lots of different yields out there and what the Fed ends up doing with its Fed funds rate. So that's going to be key for how things end up improving. Moving forward, the market is currently neutral. We're in between fear and neutral, which is pretty interesting. Right now, greed is making up sentiment, and the market still has quite a bit of buyers out there. Greed is also making up sentiment for the puts and call option positioning, and market volatility is still dipping down as we're starting to see the VIX dropping to fill its gap. For NIO, we actually have the transcript from their earnings. We saw their Q1 loss come out, and deliveries did fall a little bit for the current data, but that is once again for the first quarter. Right now, NIO's deliveries have improved a lot, so hopefully we see better numbers going into the next earnings. But for now, it was a little bit more negative. So why did NIO drop? I just want to make it very clear that they ended up doing, once again, just above 30,000 deliveries. That's only a bit of a drop by 3% relative to the previous quarter. This is for the first quarter, guys. We're currently in the second quarter, so numbers have improved quite a bit already. And then they did do something good, which was they raised their guidance for expectations for deliveries for about 54 to 56,000 units, which is going to be insane growth, 129% year over year to 138% on the top of the end. So it's pretty good stuff, at least for what we're expecting to come out with big improvements in revenue. But the reason why the share price dropped for NIO is because their revenue is very, very poor. Their overall deliveries were not that strong for Q1. You guys can see right here, we got a big decline in Q1. Also, relative to what we saw in Q1 of last year, we saw quite a bit of a decline. Sorry, last year's right here, not over there. This was 2022. But even compared to 2022 and 2023, Q1 was pretty weak for NIO. They started off very weak for this end. The same thing happened to Tesla. Remember, Tesla now deliveries so it's not the best. So it is what it is. It happens. It's not very strong. And with that happening, the revenue is kind of low. We were expecting much better numbers for the revenue. They announced about 1.37 billion in revenue. They missed the expectations, which were much higher, closer to about 1.5 billion. That's actually down 7.2% year over year and down 42% from the fourth quarter of 2023, sadly. Deliveries were actually down 3.18%. That's why the share price is not happy. But remember, this is old data that it's still reacting to, and also old data from revenue. The second quarter is about to finish in 1 month, and so far the numbers are looking pretty strong. We have 1 more month left. We just saw NIO break through record deliveries, so I expect the second quarter to be a lot stronger, and I think that they're going to be meeting the expectations of a lot of investors then. So I think that guidance is pretty good for NIO for what they're expecting for the future with their stronger deliveries, which should improve a lot of things such as margins and such, which is what William Liebman has been saying. However, for the short term, all the stock is doing is reacting to the Q1 data. Q1 is clearly over, but at the end of the day, it's still affecting it. So we just have to be open-minded nonetheless and just continue from here. I also want to mention that when it comes to other factors, NIO had about 84 million in volume. That's actually above average. So we sold off on high volume. Not a very good sign. We saw short volume increased about 63%. And simultaneously, the Bank of America Securities maintained a neutral rating for the company. We also happen to see JP Morgan upgrade. They basically had a different rating before. I think it kind of shifted a little bit. Price price ratio is dipping. NIO's losing some strength. Fridays tend to be green only about 53% of the time. And we tend to see more volatility around 1 o'clock p.m. and also during the second to last hour of the day. So, that being said, what do I think is going to happen to NIO? Honestly, guys, we're looking a little bit more bearish on the 4-hour time frame, so we might dip a little bit more. I'm going to be looking for a retest of 4.8s tomorrow, but it also depends on the deliveries numbers. But when you look at the daily time frame, it look kind of weak, technically speaking. We could actually drop a little bit more towards 4.8. If we lose this support all the way down here, this 4.7 area, there's a big gap to fill all the way down here in the lower fours. So that's going to be key. If NIO could bounce off this and start to push back up, then there's a chance the inverse head and shoulders could play out. If not, it's going to likely dip lower. So I still think it's going to dip nonetheless, but we'll see how well it holds support. For tomorrow, I do predict it might dip a little bit lower, all the way down to about 4.75 to 4.8. Then we'll see if it bounces or not, but there might be a little bit more downside coming. So I want to call that out. There's an inverse head and shoulders that is still slanted and still holding. So we'll see if NIO gets a bounce or not. But for now, I just wanted to say that we're not worried about that. We'll just have to see if NIO could hold critical support. As far as SPY goes, SPY has a bearish divergence and showing signs of a potential decline. It depends if we can try to break above 535 or not. If we break 535, it's going to be 536 is our next target. If we lose 535 and we kind of, break below that, we'll be looking for a retest of 533.5 and 531.5. If we lose that target at the 530 area, then yes, we could turn bearish. My gut tells me we might actually decline just a little bit before we try to bounce as the most likely possibility. And that's going to depend a lot on the numbers we get tomorrow for unemployment. For Nvda, we saw this thing decline quite a bit. We have a gap to fill right here, all the way down towards, well, I'm not referring to this gap, I'm actually referring to this one over here, the one that's at around 1160. So I think we're going to likely come down to fill that gap. Let me show you this on the daily time frame, which gap I'm talking about. There's a gap right here on the daily for Nvda, all the way down to the 1160s. So I wouldn't be surprised if Nvda kind of pops a little bit and eventually comes about down a little lower. It might drag the market down a little bit before it tries to bounce again. So I do see a little dip possibly coming. If the unemployment numbers are not the best and we end up losing 1200, look for that gap fill in my personal opinion. Bitcoin's trying to push higher. We're holding up decently, but now we have this tough resistance between 72,000 and 71,500. So we'll have to see how this ends up holding. If you get a rejection, your 72,000 will be dipping down to 68,000. If we hold this, we'll try to rebound. My gut tells me we might actually try to dip a little bit and retest around 68,500, depending on where the 20 EMA is, for a little decline before we try to bounce again. For the QQQ, we're holding up well, but there could be a retest of the high. So I wouldn't be surprised if we actually dip a little bit. We come back down to about 460. Then we try to bounce as the most likely possibility. That's a possibility considering how much we pumped already. If we could break past 465, I'll be looking at 466 and 468 as resistance. If we lose 464, we'll be dipping all the way down to about 462.5. If that fails us, then we're going to likely revisit the 460 area, which is where we have the previous resistance. The most likely move might be a little decline thanks to data before we try to bounce again. We want to cool off and then continue to go higher later on. It's a buy the dip market so far, so we'll see how things go. And then for Apple, we did close below 195, so that's a sign of weakness. We could decline a bit closer to about 193 to retest the previous resistance before we try to bounce again. There's also this gap to fill all the way down to the 192s, so I do favor downside as a stronger possibility. For Amazon, we're looking very bullish on the daily time frame. Going to be looking for a big push all the way up to about 187. Meta is also looking a little bit more indecisive. We are below 495. If we break through that, we could turn bullish. If we lose that, we could be dipping back down towards the support all the way down here around 482 before we try to bounce. So we'll have to wait and see. And then we have the memes out there. Be careful with these. I know they're going to likely run more, but you want to be careful because retailer uses manipulation for bigger players who are just doing all sorts of things. They want people to be used for liquidity. Just be careful. I think GameStop is going to fill up to fill this gap. get very close to 50, maybe go even higher. Once this breaks, we'll be looking for a break all the way up towards 65. So I think it's going to be pushing to the high again, if not higher than that, for a little rally. AMC is going to follow the trend, going to be looking for a push to fill this gap all the way up towards 6.82. So I favored that as well. Do I think the move is going to be sustainable? Not necessarily. It might just be another pump and dump. So just be ready for that. Anyways, for NIO, anticipate some more downside for tomorrow. A test of 4.8 to 4.75. And we'll have to see if it bounces or not. If we get the bounce, then yes, the inverse head and shoulders could play out. If not, then it's not going to look too good. All right, so that's my view, guys. Temporarily, that's the way I see things. Even if NIO does get a big decline, hypothetically, excuse me, if we lose 4.8 and we do end up coming down to fill the gap, all I see is another buying opportunity. So I'm not really worried because I'm very confident their Q2 earnings will be a lot better. Big deliveries growth. I think NIO is going to improve a lot over the next few months once we get better data. But for now, if there is a decline, we'll see how big the extent of that decline happens to be, and we'll see how things go moving forward. All right. Thank you for listening, guys. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. NIO to the moon. The long term is still bright despite these short term declines. And peace out.